I'm George from Ireland, so welcome back to my channel. And in this video, I'm going to be asking how long Russia can sustain its campaign in Ukraine. I've been told I speak too fast sometimes. I'm going to try and slow down and minimize the filler words, the ums, the ers, and so forth. So the war has been going on for over half a year. Before this war began in earnest, Russia was already illegally occupying about 10% of Ukrainian territory. Now, Putin at the beginning avowed that he didn't want to take a centimeter of Ukrainian territory simply to stop genocide, which is an outrageous lie. He's the one committing genocide, and denazify Ukraine. Well, there's certainly no Nazi government there. I don't think there are any Nazis at all, even the Azov battalion. And then what was the last thing? Oh yes, well, certainly regime change, demilitarize. I think that bit there. He was telling the truth. I think he really wants to get rid of the Ukrainian military, like to co-opt some of their soldiers into the Russian army. They're willing to join. That largely worked with the Ukrainian Navy back in 2014. Hello there, Laura Jane. Anyway, so they of that 90% of land that was still in Ukrainian hands, Russia's taken 10% of it. They've achieved about a ninth of their goal in over 6 months. Bear in mind, they thought they'd take Kiev in 3 days, and a lot of Western pundits thought they would too. I thought the Ruskies would take it, although it'd be more like a fortnight, and I thought the whole war would be over in a few weeks. The template I took was to look at the Russo-Georgian War, which lasted about 10 days in 2008, and factored in that Ukraine has got something like 12 times the population of Georgia, about 10 times the territory. I think it will last about 10 times as wrong. Well, boy, was I wrong about that one. Because that was a critical mass where it's just harder to take the whole country. And of course, Russia wasn't even trying to take the whole of Georgia, just nibble away at a bit of it. And of course, Russia hadn't built up its armed forces so much, was was a bit more worried about sanctions back then. Putin's sort of throwing caution to the winds. So the Putin's will to fight is there. The Russian public has actually got some will to fight. Yeah, the people who are blinded by Russian propaganda and people who are just bigots and bloodthirsty. But that's not most Russian people, of course. And I've got to put myself in their position. They say never judge a man till you walk a mile in his shoes. If I were Russian, if I was hearing this all day long, there's 360-degree propaganda around me, I would believe some of it. And of course, there is a little bit of merit in Russia's claims that most people in Luhansk and Donetsk would like to join Russia. I think if a completely fair plebiscite were held, they would vote for it. Likewise in Crimea. That doesn't mean that invading is allowed. Doesn't mean it's Russian under international law. And the Ukrainian government is not perfect. And yes, there is a bit of corruption. And some of these people, they are nostalgic about those who fought for the Third Reich and so on. But, overall, Ukraine is definitely in the right. It's allowed to defend its own land. Do I think this could spiral into a nuclear war? I think there's a slight risk of that, and Putin wants to frighten us by saying there's a high chance of it. Economic collapse. I wouldn't go that far, but there's certainly economic hardship already, and that's what Putin's hoping, that he's turning the heating off in midwinter. Soon we'll be on our knees beseeching him to turn it back on. And Zaporizhia nuclear power plant needs to get disconnected from the Ukrainian grid to cut off their winter in their heating in winter, divert that to Crimea, and so on. It was also hurting the Russian economy. And, he's called for another 137,000 soldiers. The Russians have ever achieved their target in the past 30 years. Please point it out to me. Okay, they might get something towards it. Will achieve 100%? I don't think so. So by January as well, they'll be lucky if they get 100,000, not 137,000. That'll only replace the 80,000 they've lost. Plus, they would have lost a bit more by January. So that was simply replacing those they've lost. So I don't think they're going to sort out their manpower problem because, yeah, you need equipment. They also say you need a lot of numbers. But remember, the coalition of the willing, they liberated Iraq despite being outnumbered by the Iraqis. They were obviously much better equipped than the Iraqis, and the Iraqis were very demotivated. Only a few hardcore Ba'athists were willing to fight. Most of them just, melted away and wanted to be freed and did not want to fight for this genocidal, maniacal tyrant Saddam Hussein. But the economic factor is crucial, and that viewer there just touched on it. So Russia had something like 645 billion US dollars worth of reserves before this war. Now they've burnt through 75 billion of that easily already. About 300 billion of that is stored, was in Western banks, has been frozen. So they've got something like $280 billion left. and it's estimated they've got about a year and a half to go, and they will have spent all of it. There are other problems because they're selling less gas, less oil, and they can sell some to India and China, not as much as to offset the amount that they're not selling to the West anymore. They're selling from a 30% reduction to the Chinese. Um, Other products they're not selling. Their internal economy is going badly. They can't get transponders, microchips. Their car manufacturing has fallen to 97%. It's fallen 97%. It's only 3% of what it was this time last year, and on and on. Their airlines are going to go bust. A lot of their IT engineers, their scientists, their academics have left. There's rising unemployment. The ruble is just too high, making their exports even harder to sell, even those who are willing to buy them, and on and on and on. So there's economic pain. Not that bad at the moment, but it'll be getting worse. That's a big headache for them. So in about a year and a half is really going to come crunch time, unless of course the West chooses to ease off sanctions, because sanctions. The trouble is, by hurting the other country, you also hurt yourself. And there might be people in the West pleading with leaders, come on, cut a deal. Even the war's going to carry on. We need to be able to buy more oil, gas, and coal. Unless sanctions are lifted in Iran, sanctions are lifted on Venezuela, unless the Saudi Arabians can be persuaded to produce way more oil and gas, we really need that Russian oil, gas, and coal. Western countries have got, I suppose, tar sands, shale oil, but I don't think it's going to come online in sufficient amount to deal with the loss of the access to Russian energy. So yeah, I think that's Russia will be close to crisis point in a year and a half, by which time they might have won the war or negotiated peace. Obviously, it's not going to be easy for Western countries. There's going to be real economic pain, and Putin realizes the Western pain threshold is rather lower than the Russian pain threshold. Western countries are been quite indulged for quite a long time. Fairly high minimum wage, high standard of living, generous welfare. Expect to have publicly funded healthcare, except in the United States, to have subsidized higher education, even free of charge higher education, and so on. And all that's going to become unaffordable. Taxes are going to have to go up and things like that. These energy bills are just going through the roof. So there may be some political pressure. Governments may be ushered into office who are willing to settle with the Russian Federation for the sake of getting oil, gas, and coal. So look at the Hungarians. Orban Viktor, he's still getting Russian oil. He got an opt out from the EU sanctions. Why can't my country? And the Hungarians are going to do it, and this other country going to do it, another country going to do it. Why don't we all do it? Be an absolute chump to be suffering. We don't need to. Do you think would a pro-Russian referendum result mean in this conflict? Well, first of all, nothing. They would say it is a nullity because it'd be under the superintendence of the Russian armed forces. You'd be voting with a gun to your head, almost literally. And even if it was held on a completely fair basis, that would not, under international law, means this land automatically has to go to the Russian Federation. People do not always get what they want. There are numerous examples of that around the world. It would strengthen the case for it happening. And they never allow a fair vote in Russia. You see the ballot boxes are stuffed at an absolutely enormous scale, if in referenda and in elections. I mean, Putin probably win anyway. We're not difficult when you have total control of the media. But he doesn't want to win by 51%. He wants to win by sort of 78%. And the turnout is just embarrassingly low. There's a lot of political apathy. That's the way Putin wants it. He wants them to be disengaged from politics, to believe that they're powerless, it's pointless, resistance is futile. Just get on with your lives and have other hobbies, and don't take any interest in public affairs, because the securocrats, the oppressive apparatus, they will run it for you, as they've been running it really since 1917. So yeah, I think Russia can keep this for about a year and a half, partly for financial reasons. I mean, they're almost out of missiles now, especially guided missiles. They've been using DOM bombs for a few months because they just don't have any smart bombs left, and they have real problems with the technology they need to sustain the war. Now, the Ukrainians, if the West is willing to keep helping them, is going to get better and better, a bigger army, more soldiers trained abroad, and more sophisticated weapons. And if the West is bold enough, and I hope it is, longer range and heavier weapons to hit deep inside Russia and make it really painful, try and bring Putin to his senses. What haunts him is being overthrown by massive demonstrations. He was in East Germany in 1989 when that happened, in Dresden. Seemingly a robust communist system fell very fast indeed. There were difficulties. It was not a crisis point until November 1989, and all of a sudden it was gone. And he really doesn't want that scenario. The trouble is actually made it more likely by the hardship this is imposing on his people. And it's all his fault, and it's all avoidable. Right. Thank you so much for watching my channel. So subscribe on Patreon and donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Remember, I'll help you with essays, dissertations, everything like that. Bye.